Hello. The Divine Code reading for December 25th, pages 401 and 402. We are in the chapter Suicide and Sanctifying One's Life for one of the 7 Noahide commandments. Topic number 5. If a person is being forced to kill someone who is already dying, or an embryo in its mother's womb, he should rather let himself be killed than to kill the sick or dying person or the embryo. Simenhook, Kinok Commandment 296, which is uncertain as to the Torah law in this situation. Noda B. Yehuda Koshan Mishpat, chapter 59, forbids this. Igrit Moshe Koshan Mishpat, volume 2, 69:1, is uncertain in regard to a fetus, although he originally leans to forbid it. Regarding a person who is mortally wounded or a gassus in the throes of death, he completely forbids the murder, which is also the opinion of Tzitz Eliezer, volume 9, 17:6, volume 10, 25:5. So the majority of opinions would forbid a person killing either a very sick person, a person close to death, or killing a fetus. We're forbidden to do this, even in the if we're being threatened by death if we don't do it. We're forbidden to do this. There are opinions that say we would be permitted, or it's not totally clear on some of these. So it would not be both because of the uncertainty and also because of the difficulty the person is under. He would not be prosecuted for it. However, it would still be considered forbidden, and it's a complex issue that the heavenly court would have to sort through in this regard, as far as the Torah aspects are involved. It's not, because of the complexity. It would not be handled by a Torah, a physical Torah court. It would appear that the same principle applies to injuring another person. One should let himself be killed. And Rabbi Zalman Nechemia Goldberg views the law as unclear in regard to whether one must let himself be killed if he is being forced to injure or rape. The author finds, author of the Divine Code finds, reason why it should be at least permitted for a person to let himself be killed to avoid this, and not be considered as prohibited suicide. So normally we would be not allowed to give up our life in the area of for various reasons. We're not allowed to give up our life, except in areas that we have permission to do that. And so the question is whether or not we have permission to give up our life rather than do various acts. And causing great injury or rape would be an area that we would be permitted to give up our life rather than be forced to commit an act. It is not considered a prohibited suicide because of the dictum Is your blood redder than your fellow? This can be seen as a fortiori from Tamar, Genesis 38:25, who submitted herself to be executed rather than to embarrass Judah, since publicly embarrassing a person is likened to murder. However, it is unclear whether a person is obligated to give up his life to avoid injuring or raping another. So we have various levels of offense. Outright murder and even murder of an embryo or a sick person would be prohibited, and we would be required to give up our life rather than murder a person. In the area of injuring a person, that's a serious injury, like taking a limb from a person, or in the case of rape, that's a second category, which we might have permission to give up our life, but we're not required to. And then in an area such as embarrassing, and Tamar was not only embarrassing, she was embarrassing her father-in-law, and that might be considered another level of something under the general category of murder that Tamar felt was appropriate for her to give up her life rather than embarrass Judah in public like that. See Pishki Teshuva Yeridea 157:16. That cites Radbaz chapter 3, volume 3, chapter 627. Yad Abraham Yeridea 157, based on Rambam Laws of Marriage 21:11. Or Shemeach on Rambam Laws of Murderers 7:8, and Igrit Moshe Yeridea volume 2, 174:4, who all write that one is not required to lose a limb, for example, a hand or a foot, in order to save a person's life. It therefore appears to the author that a Jew or Gentile may not cut off or break another person's limb or commit rape to save his own life. And the common sense dictum, is your blood redder than your fellow, would apply even to another person's limb. So we are not required to lose a limb to save another person's life. Therefore, we should not take another person's limb in order to save our own life. And rape is in a category of taking a limb from a person. That's on the same level of violence. And we cannot require another person to submit to losing a limb just to save our own life. Nevertheless, some sources say that it is permitted. Maharam Chavid in Tosafot, Tosefta Yom HaKippurim, Tractate Yoma 82b, Kli Kimda, Parshat Tzitzit, page 236. In any event, one who is forced to transgress on pain of death is not to be judged or punished by a court of law for committing the forced act, including homicide, as explained in topic 7 below. That'll be tomorrow's reading. Even though one who kills under duress is held accountable in the judgment of heaven. So there's no Torah now. There's no Torah law that is worked through regarding these complex issues. It's possible, and probably I would recommend that the courts, under the requirement to have courts of law makes rules and regulations regarding this. How does a person handle this? How does a society work through this if it happens in their, God forbid that if it happens in their midst, how do they work through it? But it's not considered on the level of murder if a person does this under duress, and it cannot be treated the same as if the person committed murder out of free will. One should let himself be one should let himself be killed if he is being forced to injure another person or commit rape. And pursuit to the purpose of raping is tantamount to pursuit for the purpose of murdering. See Rambam, Laws of Murderers, 1:10-15, who says that this is learned from the verses Deuteronomy 22:26, a consecrated maiden who is raped in the field, and Leviticus 19:16, you should not stand idly by the blood of your fellow. So in both cases, they're not, if the woman in the field, if the woman is in the city and she cries out, then people are obligated to come to her rescue. Otherwise, what's the purpose of crying out? The purpose of crying out is so that other people come to her rescue, and they're obligated to come to her rescue. In the field, there's no one to cry out to, and so she is not responsible for not crying out. From that, we see you should not stand idly by the blood of your fellow is also in relationship to the woman who's crying out. People are not to stand idly by, and therefore there's a connection between the two requirements. And similarly, a person would not be allowed to stand idly by in the case of a woman being raped. The person being forced to commit the rape also has an obligation similar to the obligation not to kill a person, would also be an obligation not to rape a person, even if even if a gun is being held to his head. Topic number 6. The above applies only if the person is being forced to physically commit direct or indirect murder. However, if one is being forced to stand at a certain spot, see Tosafot on Tractate Sanhedrin 74b and Rima Euridea, chapter 157. The person is being forced to stand in a certain spot where his body will be used by others as an instrument for murder. There is no obligation to give up one's life to save the intended victim, since the murder is being done through an action of others. So a person is being forced to stand in one spot, that spot will be conducive to the other people doing the act of murder. He's just standing there. He's not actively committing the murder. And that's not on the same level as being told to actively commit the murder. He's a passive participant in it. So he's not required to give up his life. He might be allowed to give up his life as an option. And if he's pious, he might refuse to take part in it. But he's not required to give up his life rather than take part. It need not be mentioned that one is not obligated to give up his life to save another person's life. Nevertheless, it appears permissible to do so. And this is discussed at length in the footnotes for this topic. So there's a much longer footnote than what we're seeing here. We're just being told that there is a long footnote in the Hebrew addition to the book. Volume 2, page 370. Also see topic 9 below in footnote 128, which is goes into more detail on this topic. And it would be the question of if two people are in a desert and there's not enough water. One of the two people has a canteen. There's only enough water for one person. So if they share it, they're both going to die. And only one person is able to survive with the water if he keeps it for himself. And the person who owns the water, the person who has the canteen, is the person who would live. Is it permissible for him to give the canteen to the other person, basically committing suicide, but allowing the other person to live? Is that permissible? And that apparently is going to be more topic on that discussion in a couple of days. Will actually be tomorrow plus another footnote 120 128 will be in a few days. Okay, thank you.